Night Terrors, week 2. When I first started this, I almost said season 2, but no, we're not calling it like that this time, although sometimes they do that too, which always seems awkward when I'm thinking about comics when they do the season 1, season 2 thing. I don't feel it works very well, but that's just me. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and we're going through Night Terrors. I'm going on a trip, so I'm not sure when this is gonna be up. During week 2, after, way later, but whenever it's happening because I read these and I want to talk about them with you. I'm gonna be spoiling these stories, so if you don't want to know anything, get out now. Your time to leave is now. Just abort mission. I did not read them in order because the first week they had a bit of a, not primer, but you did need to read it to understand what's going on in Night Terrors number 1. It was Night Terrors First Blood, but I didn't start with Night Terrors number 1. I jumped into, you know, Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, Night Terrors Green Lantern. And you know that they had the parallax cover going on because it's gonna come up at some point if you're dealing with any kind of Green Lantern fear thing. This one's by Jeremy Adams with art by Eduardo Pensica, and it is straight up interrupting the Green Lantern run. Dawn of DC just started, they were 2 issues in, and now it has to stop and do Night Terrors. So it's continuing on right from where that last issue left off. So it is trying its darndest to incorporate this into its run. So we have Hal seemingly waking, running up to the front of the plane, only it's his father's funeral and he's a child. And you get to see a scary dad out of a coffin, scary funeral goers. Actually, the dad coming out of the coffin, it's a pretty decent image. And from Kid Hal, you go to him working on an airstrip and being reamed out by Carol, which doesn't really do anything for him. And then he just jumps into the plane and then it goes to Abin Sur. So it's basically cycling through these different things that Hal could be afraid of. And that's purposeful, as we'll see later on in the issue. Insomnia, or one of these sleepless nights, we'll talk about them later, is going to claim that it took a while to pinpoint Hal's fear, because remember there was a period where Hal was known as the man without fear, and there was a period back in the Bronze Age where he legitimately felt no fear. And then they stopped that because that's an actual condition. The part where he's with Abin Sur and he gets to the ring and he thinks he's about to be a hero, only instead it tricks him and is draining him of his energy, that's pretty solid. But then it goes into a Guardian scene and tries to play it like that's one of his darkest fears. The Guardian's telling him that he's not good enough, he's doing things wrong. To which I say he's lived that fear several times. Now, of course, what we're leading up to is the Parallax entity. So that's our build up to the big Parallax monster. And then we cut to a backup story. This one has a Sinestro backup. We see sad Sinestro in his leather jacket getting beaten up before he's sucked into a dream. And the art on the Giger skeletons eating the buildings, love it. Also, there's an editor's note talking about the role Sinestro played in Dark Crisis, and it says in the now classic Dark Crisis. I admire the hopium. You have Sinestro confronting different versions of himself. On the whole, this one is pretty much what you would expect for nightmares for both characters. There are a couple of cool imagery panels, but on the whole, this one has the vibe of just trying to not disturb the run as much as possible and play with themes and fears that are already going on for the characters in said run. But let me know what you think of it. The next one I read was also not Night Terrors, it was Shazam. I went right to Shazam, aka Captain Marvel. This one was by Mark Waid, art by Roger Cruz. This one's about Mary Marvel, or Mary Bromfield. Before we get into the nightmare, we prime a bit with some of what her concerns are, which are concerns for her family and the responsibility of looking after them and trying to save everybody. So when we get to her nightmare, she wakes up to her step-siblings needing help and the house is surrounded by desert, it's on fire, just everything's going on. Billy shows up and he looks like Black Adam, to the point where if they hadn't said it was him, I would have just assumed it was Black Adam, even though he's over having his own nightmare. For Mary, we see that the house is burning down, her powers don't work, she's just very overwhelmed, and there is a nice shot of her running into the house on fire. The opposite of the "this is fine" meme. She says Shazam and wakes up, but gets forced back into the dream. Or did she? Did she ever leave? This one has some nice subtle trippy elements. The whole being trapped in a dream and thinking you woke up but didn't, that can be a fun one to play with, though some will feel this is cliche. The one thing for Mary's dream is that it does have a lot of wonky dream logic that works, things that make sense in a dream, but are also kind of indications if you're in that kind of half-waking state that you are dreaming. Mary is more with it because of her wisdom. So Insomnia talks to her about the Nightmare Stone and just really plays up her fear of not being able to save people. You get this really cool sequence where she can't say the word, it's choking her, and then Billy shows up, evil, and says it's his word and forces lightning on the step-siblings, killing them one by one, till he walks to her and whispers in her ear. It's a cliffhanger. That last little bit, those last few panels, very strong. That's a very good cliffhanger. That's one that makes you want to come back. Some of the others have not been so strong. Of the Marvel family characters, this one stronger than Black Adam from week 1, but so far nothing's really gone that hard with the whole dream sequence thing, except for, you know, Batman vomiting up that gun bat, which many of you pointed out from week 1 does look like one of the devils from Chainsaw Man. Good catch. Next up, I read Zatanna. Yeah, I read the main issue last. This one was written by Dennis Culver with art by David Baldian. Firstly, this one has some preamble. We see Zatanna trying to reach Red Tornado, fighting the Sleepless Knights under the Hall of Justice, which if you just came in, you're gonna be like, who are the Sleepless Knights? What is going on? This one has a bit of whiplash in terms of, oh, there are people we don't know here. But this one also has a recap as to how we got to this point. So we get to know that she went down to the Justice League Dark Archives, that Detective Chimp and Wonder Woman are knocked out, and then we meet the Sleepless Knights, and they're called Sir Morbid and Iron Maiden. Why? Why Iron Maiden? So many other connotations. Sir Morbid is a very Silver Age name. Then we meet the Sleepless Queen looking for the Nightmare Stone, which makes it feel like this is expanding and we still haven't laid the full groundwork yet. Why couldn't we just have Insomnia? Now we're expanding to Sleepless Knights, Sleepless Queen, all of these things, and it's all happening in all of these tie-ins. It's a bit difficult to put them all together in one place. It's doable, but it's not as seamless as it could be. So Zatanna tries to summon some help and she ends up summoning Robot Man. And there's a reference to when her dad died. And it's a solid one. Her and Robot Man escape down a secret passageway. The Sleepless Queen says Zatanna is useful to them and sends them after. There's a dark maze that taunts them with their inner demons and fears. And there's a really nice panel of her father, a dark version, attacking her. So ultimately what happens when there are demons, personalized demons, you gotta swap, which they do. So they switch demons, they're able to defeat them that way. They're able to hide Detective Chimp and Wonder Woman, but then Robot Man gets skewered, that classic skewered right through the back image. But that doesn't kill him, it turns him into a Sleepless Knight, and he becomes the Rust Bringer. We need to work on these names for the Sleepless Knights, guys. Rust Bringer. Next up, we had Night Terror's Robin, and you may be asking which one? Well, it's two of them. We have Tim and we have Jason. And for this one, Tim is very in character. He feels almost like a bit of a classic, closer to 90s or 2000s Tim. So if you've been missing that, then you're gonna get that here. Tim is pushing himself as he does, and Babs is worried. He's just really going too hard. And then we have Jason who's tracking a drug shipment, and they get sucked into a nightmare cloud together, which makes their world all wonky and distorted. It also allows them to be able to determine that they are in a dream. And they're both able to resist it a bit better because they've had training from Batman and dealing with Dr. Destiny. It's Tim who figures out that they're dreaming very quickly and starts to run through what you're supposed to do in these scenarios and trying to determine what type of dream it is and the like. Jason hits him to check, which knocks a bunch of Tim's teeth out, and you have talk of that common tooth dream, which is definitely one of mine, teeth falling out, very common nightmare. However, they don't stay together. They do get separated in a very cool splash page where they get pulled into their own separate nightmares where they have to deal with their own separate concerns, because those were already kind of floating around, like Tim was seeing the lockers from his high school. Tim has a callback all the way to Identity Crisis when his dad died with an editor's note. I have to say, and it's gonna come up again for another story, the editor's notes in this series so far are on point. These editor's notes direct you even back to older things from past crises and stuff so you can check them out. Excellent. I'm so excited about it. Not everybody's gonna want to check them out, but the fact is that they're there and they're actually going to the correct issue. Unlike the Punchline comic, Punchline number 5, where there was an editor's note, but it went to the wrong issue. These are going to the right ones. This is also a unique place to take Tim. It is a trauma point, but it's also not one that everybody might think of right off the bat. There's a lot to play with there, and it plays with his inadequacies and his fears, especially surrounding the idea of being Robin and where he's going and the mantle and all of those things. As for Jason, we have the crowbar. Of course. Now Tim is to relive the day of his father's death over and over and over. And all the while he's taunted by his own expectations, some of which he's put on himself about being Robin. Jason is fighting a Red Hood monster with a crowbar. The symbolism is there, but it's also a little silly. The monster looks a little bit silly. But the idea here is how this is his monster, but there are also traits of it that he's adopted himself. So that fear of, is he becoming a monster? And then they do actually say that later on. So you're not just imagining it, that is what they're going for. There is a nice nod to DC's obsession with number 52 in that Tim has to go through the loop 52 times. Then the Bat Fam shows up and they taunt him. You get this panel of Tim just huddled on the bed, and it's a solid image with all the plushies of the Bat Fam around him. And then you have Jason fighting all these duplicated Red Hoods, because every time he shoots one, more spring up like a Hydra. The two make contact again, not physically, but they can hear each other and they have to come up with a plan, and that's the end. This one grew on me. I will admit that when I saw the accurate editor's note and I saw that they had taken Tim back to this point that not many people reference, I was excited. Less so with Jason, because that's always where they go with Jason. Where else do you go with Jason? I don't know, him kicking that guy out the window? dropping him out the window. Sorry, accidentally letting him fall out the window. And it was nice to see the two of them interact again. They have a unique dynamic and it's fun to play with, and it hasn't been seen too much as of late, time of recording. It's been there, but it used to be more at the forefront. Next up, Night Terrors, Flash. This is by Alex Packnadel with art by Daniel Bayliss. Now we open on Barry talking about Iris and her being unique because she asked him about how he sees the world rather than about how fast he is. And he says that it's facts that keep him grounded, which is something, it's a cue for us as the reader that we need to be paying attention to the facts. Because as the story goes on, you see that lots of facts are wrong. They're not little facts, but it depends how in on the lore you are. You may miss some of them, but there's some pretty big things, like Iris not knowing who Linda is, Wally being Kid Flash, just a bunch of things that aren't right. Because, and this is one of the advantages of when you have the canon you can play with, is that you can use it as an offset to showing when something is wrong. The trick with canon is knowing how to use it correctly, not being shackled by it, knowing when to move outside of it and when to adhere to it. It's a balancing act, an art. Since Barry sees the world like a dream, it's taking him a bit longer to catch on, especially because he's distracted because Wally's been badly hurt. And there is an accurate editor's note to JSA Classified. I know this is like this little thing, and for most people they're not even gonna notice it or care, but it is elevating these stories for me. Wally tells Barry that there's a monster in the Speed Forest, and it all went wrong when he saw the monster inside. It slowed him down. He wasn't able to stop Gorilla Grodd from spearing him in the side. So he goes to the prison to talk to Gorilla Grodd, and he sees that the villains are kind of messed up. Trickster is telling him, are you dreaming us or are we dreaming you? And when he goes to Grodd, Grodd is also being very cryptic and telling him that something's obviously off. Can't he feel it? And he just loses control, phases through, starts beating up Grodd, and even as he's doing it, he's realizing this isn't me, this isn't what I do. And as this is going on, Grodd tells him that they're being watched. So Barry decides he needs to find out what's going on. He goes up to the watchtower, and there he meets Hal. And Hal is, I just threw myself into the sun to redeem myself after parallax. Barry isn't fazed by this, and Hal says something sweet. He says something about anything for the brave and the bold when they get out Barry's cosmic treadmill so that he can go back in time. And he tries to go back to when Wally was hurt, but he fails and he gets sucked into the monster. And that panel is very cool. This one had some cool paneling and some cool imagery. Also, the dialogue for the Grodd and Wally fight was solid. It was subtly trippy, but again, it may not feel like it's doing enough for some people. On the whole, this was again a very well-structured and competent dream sequence, but nothing too out of the ordinary or crazy, which may be what some are looking for. This brings us to Night Terrors, the main event by Joshua Williamson, with art by Giuseppe Camuncoli, Stefano Nessi, and Casper Winsgaard. We open on Boston Brand, and he has this intro about death-defying acts and how the audience and performer must both believe that it will happen. That's how it makes it work. There's a bit of depth there, and the art style complements what's going on, and also you're having Boston Brand as a bit of a horror host, which they've done before, and it does work well with the theme of this event. The one thing is that he does not give you a recap, so if you did not read First Blood, you're just going to be thrown right in there to him possessing Batman's body and fighting Insomnia. This issue is mostly seeding some things. We're learning a bit about who Insomnia is, why the Nightmare Stone is important, that kind of vibe. We learn that Dr. Destiny was afraid of the stone. Insomnia calls himself the God of Nightmares. And so to try and figure this out, Deadman jumps into him to possess him to see what he can just glean from being inside his mind. So you get a big page spread with hints the Nightmare Stone. I see Wesley Dodds. Hey Wesley. And amazingly, this stunned me, I have to say, and it probably shouldn't have, but it did. It tied into Lazarus Planet and the Lazarus Reign. It actually directly tied Insomnia's creation to that. The reason why I'm surprised is that since that ended, not many stories have referenced it. It's just been very much in passing. So to have it be such a big part, a catalyst in this event, it's nice to see. It does feel like the timing is a bit off of it, and that maybe these would work better if they weren't events and instead just built as storylines. Like we could have gone from the Lazarus Reign storyline into a Night Terrors storyline, and that may have flowed better than having these events that are kind of clunky and stop and start books. Just let it happen, and then you can collect it in a trade after and still call it Night Terrors. The Lazarus Reign gave Insomnia the ability to spy on people's dreams. First he did the inmates in Arkham Tower where he was, which is how he saw into Dr. Destiny's mind, then the heroes, but he saw them as monsters. Deadman is trying to figure out what's going on, why he sees the heroes this way, and why he's hiding his happiest memories and not his darkest ones. You do get this one panel though, where as he's being forced out, Insomnia is saying that he's a god, and Boston Brand says he's not a god, he's just some guy, which is what I was thinking, honestly. Oh, this is just some random inmate that they had in Arkham, but you don't need to say it. Don't say the quiet part out loud. It does make you wonder if they needed to use a new character for this, especially because the Lazarus reign was just changing all kinds of people. If you could have used an established character, but we'll see how it works out. Maybe it's gonna be an amazing reveal. Time for recording. Maybe it's already been seen and I posted this 6 weeks later. So Deadman hops back into Batman's body, he flees and he goes to look for some help, and we do see some snippets of what other people are doing, like Zatanna and Red Tornado. Insomnia then summons some sleepless nights, which he does not fully explain, so for this story and Zatanna's, you don't get a full explanation into what's going on there, but they are sent out to follow Deadman. He's gonna try and find a hero who specializes in dreams, and he has some Lazarus resin left because even though it was swept off the earth apparently, so we don't need to talk about it, Batman kept some because he keeps some of everything. So Boston Brand brings to the cemetery and brings Wesley Dodds back to life, which he is very chill with. Way more chill than I would be about suddenly being brought back to life and be like, yo, do the dream thing. So we have some Wesley Dodds, which admittedly for me, I am a fan of the Golden Age Sandman. That does make me a bit excited. That was week 2, and yes, it feels like I barreled through that because, as mentioned, I'm going on a trip. On the whole, I enjoyed week 2 more than week 1. It felt like there was more emotional drama going on. I don't know why I hit emotional like that than the first week, even though in terms of trippy imagery, there wasn't too much in either week, but there were some solid panels in each of these issues. There was also some playing with dream logic, which was fun, although it didn't go too hard again. You had that with The Flash, you had that with Shazam. Green Lantern felt like it was just trying to keep on keeping on. Zatanna's, even though it had a recap, felt a bit like you would be missing a bit, like there were just a couple of panels or something that you missed somewhere, but they weren't in Night Terrors #1, which in and of itself does feel a bit bare bones. This is definitely an event where the tie-ins are helping to flesh it out in terms of theme and dread, such as there is. With just Night Terrors on its own, it would be confusing if you didn't have First Blood, because then you would just be jumping right into it. If you just went into Night Terrors #1 assuming that you could start there because it says #1, it may be a bit more difficult. You could pick it up, but it's just, why do it that way? I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but I wonder. But again, on its own, it's very by numbers to the point. So I can see for some this feeling very middling, and maybe it would have fared better if it had been a storyline and not an event. It is nice to see that it's tying in. It is, again, nice to see all those editor's notes and the like. But those are just my quick thoughts, and I want to know what you think. Are you enjoying it? Are you skipping it? Which ones are you checking out? Do you agree with the thoughts I had on these ones? Because again, this was just a quick comic catch-up, so it wasn't too in-depth, not really diving into the meat and the bones, but I want to hear from you. Tell me your faves, tell me what you don't like, and I will see you when I can see you. We'll be back with more videos. Until then, there are plenty to watch, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.